It was a high-risk, extreme fire danger day.
A bushfire got in to the coal mine. The coal mine is like a volcano.
The ground itself was burning, and you had layer upon layer upon layer of burning earth.
It's like walking into the pits of hell. That's what it was like because of the scale of it. Just hundreds and hundreds of hectares of burning coal. That's what it was like, and all the surface is just glowing orange. The severity of an industrial fire like that is beyond most people's comprehension.
The manager of the mine came on the radio and said, "Oh, we expect to have this fire out within 2 weeks." We wondered if he'd even seen what was going on out there, because nobody could imagine that that would be controlled.
You knew straight away, this is going to kill us, this is really bad.
There was a huge disparity between what we were experiencing and what the government and the media were telling us we were experiencing. The people were sick. It was obvious.
They were in lots of trouble. They couldn't exit that environment at all. The poor people that were living in a community, in a town that's unfortunately right beside a coal mine that's burning. It's horrible.
They couldn't have planned a disaster better than what they had created there. You had piles of dry leaves, pine needles, highly flammable materials lying over the top of exposed, decayed brown coal that is bone dry. And you could see cracks in the earth, probably 10, 15 feet high, 6 foot deep, just glowing red on fire.
I think there's a difference with coal. Coal burns inwards, whereas with a bushfire you can put a hose on it, you can put it out, but not with a coal fire. A coal fire will burn in or down. You'll put out the top part, but it's still burning underneath. The characteristics are different. Not working in black coal, but I know that with brown coal and black coal there's two distinct differences. Brown coal is very easy to ignite.
The coal is just like digging really soft dirt, but that's okay. I mean, that's one issue, but when it's burning, it's a completely different material altogether. Some of the faults were really, really big and couldn't put them out with water, flood them with water, wouldn't work. So we actually physically had to excavate them out, and there was hundreds of them.
It's a combination of factors that come in. A disaster is never caused by one single factor. You had bad weather, you had an existing fire, you had somebody had planted a blue gum plantation, you had no access, you had no water supply, and you had a massive pile of flammable material ready to go up.
It's been 14 years since I've been down the mine, and when I went in 2 weeks after the fire, I did notice a few things that wouldn't have been there under the SEC system, and it sort of worried me a little bit that this was allowed to happen. Under the SEC and under the Fire Service Policy and Code of Practice, it states that you must have the coal covered by pipelines. I think today the emphasis is on making money to the extent that the fire protection part is left. So I was a little bit concerned that the fire policy, the sections I saw weren't being followed.
If they had kept the spray systems in place, the fire would have been suppressed, it wouldn't have got a hold, it wouldn't have been a problem. The guys in the meal room, when we went in for a cup of coffee later in the morning, the workers from the mine were telling us, they sold all that gear. All the fire suppression gear was too expensive to keep in place and keep maintained, so they pulled it out and sold it for scrap metal because all the heads are made of brass. So rather than keeping millions of dollars worth of fire suppression gear in place ready in case of an emergency, they got probably $50,000 for scrap metal.
Authorities concede they're concerned about the effects smoke generated by two fires burning in the Hazelwood mine is having on people's health.
Victoria's fire chief has conceded the mine fire that's choking Morwell could take months rather than weeks to put out.
I sort of looked up and it was like confetti in the sky, you know, this sort of dirty light grey stuff just swirling, just thick, just everywhere.
The smoke you get on you, the clothes, you burn them, you can't wash the smell out. We couldn't get away. It was coming through your toilet, it's coming through the cracks in the floor. It was just filthy, dirty, toxic yuck.
And driving into Morwell first thing in the morning, it was like a ghost town. It was completely deserted. There's nothing you could do to get away from the smell. You can feel it as you breathe it in, you can feel it going into your lungs. You could feel it in your eyes and your ears. These little black granules that were really sharp as well.
It was depressing too. You'd step out and it was just disgusting, like thick, black, foggy smoke. And then everyone's like, get away, get away. Well, living in Morwell, obviously people don't have much money. So you sat there and you couldn't do anything. You couldn't go anywhere. You were too scared to leave the house. Everyone was going through so much, but no one knew what to do.
I woke up the next morning just like feeling so ill, like I had this awful pounding headache. I felt like I drank 16 beers and smoked a pack of cigarettes, and I was just coughing up this thick bright green phlegm.
Angry Morwell residents have packed their town hall to vent their frustration about the open-cut mine fire and their fears for their future.
We need help now for everybody. This is the Latrobe Valley sticking together. Latrobe Valley are good at that. We work together. We can act together.
We were going through a 45-day disaster while people in Australia didn't know what was happening in Latrobe Valley. We felt that no longer can we just be quiet. This community has been pretty settled and never made any noises or done anything. Like, we've just been told what we're to do and we've done it. Since the fire, I think that people have said enough is enough. Why are we being ignored? Why is the community treated like they're not important? And what are you going to do about it? So we organised a protest. Now that doesn't happen in Latrobe Valley. We had a lot of people that were completely angry about what was happening and how we were being treated and being told that the air's okay for us. Just don't breathe the air, don't play sport, don't let your kids play outside, don't do anything, but the air's okay. All right, it won't hurt you. How long can a community take that for? You just can't keep going like that.
Morwell's burning issue today flared up in the city.
Disaster in the valley! We need help!
Angry Latrobe Valley residents marched to the offices of Hazelwood mine operator GDF Suez demanding answers.
It's not good enough. This has been going on for over 4 weeks now. How long can we breathe the air?
What is happening in the valley is a massive health disaster.
The thing that was really clear was that people here were getting acclimatised to living with the smoke. Me and Mum went to Terralgan and I said, oh my God, the air is so bad. And Mum said, oh really? I didn't think it was that bad. But because I hadn't been putting up with it, I could notice the kind of thick smoke that was in the air, whereas the people that were here had stopped recognising it because it just becomes so normal for them.
After 40 days of intensive firefighting, authorities have declared the fire in the northern batters of the Hazelwood mine as safe. And Victoria's Fire Services Commissioner says the remainder of the fire could be extinguished by as early as next week.
They went through 45 days of non-stop trauma and uncertainty, and this trauma was compounded by a completely inadequate response from the authorities. And the mixed messages that came out added this massive layer of stress and paranoia and distrust on top of everything. So people are dealing with the kind of multiple trauma of the kind of physical poisoning of their bodies, and then this kind of like psychological trauma of not being in any way supported or looked after and not knowing who to trust.
For me, it's about the disempowerment of this space. This community does not feel it has a voice. It does not feel that if it speaks out, that anyone listens or it changes anything anyway. And we know that the results of privatisation is what we have now in Morwell. Typical for us would be low socio-economic, usually from a very disadvantaged background. There's high rates of unemployment, domestic violence. We often get community members also come in who are quite fearful of the environment that they live in here and what's going to happen to this area in the future. Not only do we face all these challenges as a community, but individually people are faced every day with blockers. So, there's all these issues that are far more prominent that have to be dealt with straight away. So what are we going to eat today? Do we have enough money to send the kids to school? They need new shoes. These things are always in play all the time. So to actually start looking at it from a whole community point of view, where are we going? It is very, very difficult.
I think Victorians need to look at it in a way from a self-interest point of view. We talk about a state, we're supposed to be part of a state, and we're one part of that state. All the power, all the wealth that's been generated in Victoria since the 20s has been generated by electricity produced from the Latrobe Valley, and it continues to be the case right through to today. 80% of our power still comes from here.
Brown coal. It's pretty wet. Sort of like not really formed coal. It's sort of half-formed coal. Somewhere between peat and black coal. Basically it's rubbish. To burn it, you have to have huge boilers. The ones over there are 15 levels high and a level is about 2 or 3 stories. And they are hugely, hugely inefficient. Pretty much dinosaurs, really, as far as it goes now. Before the valley, Victoria's electricity grid was rather decentralised. You had little power stations everywhere. Around the First World War, they started to link them up. Didn't work very well. So they developed the Latrobe Valley coalfields where there was plentiful coal, and they created a whole industry. It developed almost as a cooperative where the communities around said that they would use the power, and therefore they developed the power station to provide it. The more they stretched the lines out, the more they got a customer base. The more they got a customer base, the more power they produced until the whole of the state was covered. It was part of the culture. Everybody had a little bit of a bash and was thinking all the time what could be done. And that's how the SEC progressed.
Power to serve industry. Power to serve agriculture. Power for transport. Power for commerce. Power for homes. This progress depends on commissioned men and women.
The SEC was a big employer of people in and around the Latrobe Valley and right across Victoria. In those days, we had something like 10,000 people working for the SEC and living in towns like Murray, Newborough, Traralgon and Yallourn North and all those sort of places. And in those days, you either worked in the SEC or you knew somebody that did. And that company was integral to the community, footy clubs, social clubs, all that infrastructure. Nothing happened around here without the SEC being involved, but nothing the SEC did in those days was done also without involvement of the community.
And this was so much a part of the way it worked. We used to view ourselves as the providers of an essential service. That was our culture, right? And that's what we did. And we didn't mind, right? We knew it was dirty, right? Our houses used to fill up with coal dust. In the days before precipitators and all that sort of stuff, the roofs, particularly at Yallourn, used to be full of coal dust, right? And it'd be like that thick inside the ceiling. From the 60s and 70s, we started to produce larger power stations. We moved away from the Yallourn base, and then Hazelwood came along, touted as the biggest station ever kind of thing. This was driven by demand. We had to produce more electricity. There was more electricity being consumed. So it was all flat strap. Let's build as many power stations as we can, burn as much coal as we can, make as much electricity as we can, and see how we go.
In the late 80s, early 90s, everybody thought, well, the way to go was more efficiency and productivity, and with a promise of improving the efficiency of the SEC, it was corporatised and became Generation Victoria, I think in about 1992. By about 1996, we saw the beginnings of the privatisation, with Hazelwood being privatised, and by about 1998, all of the infrastructure was privatised. By that time, our jobs had gone from 10,000 down to about 2,500. And we were then faced essentially with private companies that owned and operated Hazelwood and Yallourn and Loy Yang B. And they were run from boards in New York and London and faraway places. They didn't know nothing about the community or nor care about it. And by 1999, the Australian Productivity Commission recognised this community, the Latrobe Valley, as the hardest hit community in the country as a result of the restructuring. That damage has gone on to this day.
When privatisation came, privatisation takes an essential service and turns it into a negotiable commodity. Right, so the culture definitely changed. There is no two ways about that. In fact, it was destroyed. From the company's point of view, you had more workers than you needed. They were excess to needs, and in fact, the feeling was that you were not wanted. And they made that very, very clear. If a particular worker didn't want to take up extra skills, they would either take the package or they would be put aside. Not sacked, put aside. By put aside, a lot of people were put into a brew room, into an empty room, all day, every day, for weeks or months on end, with no work. And that's where they would turn up. That was, they would get paid just the same, but that was their place of work. They would sit there It was very demoralising, deliberately so. You wouldn't be able to get away with it now. They used the argument that privatisation would make it more efficient. Well, yeah, it did make it more efficient. But socially, it's a disaster. Once the jobs were gone, the companies became parasitic on the society, and our health became not even really a cost of doing business. Once that occurred, we lost our place, right? So we're no longer providing an essential service. We're no longer, we're the Latrobe Valley, we'll cop the shit and the shit air so you don't have to, right? This is our little martyrdom. And I think that's one of the major things that's affecting the valley, that we have no place in the society anymore. Our reason for being is gone.
Some of the things they're saying aren't as it was in the mine fire. It just wasn't. I had worked there for the same contractor when it was the SEC days. Of course, then when it was privatised, progressively it just deteriorated. Less and less people doing more and more work, and lots of work that should have been done within the mine just wasn't at all. And this connects with being casual, on-call casual, and I've seen it. I've actually seen it firsthand. What these companies are doing, you wouldn't believe it, is so you'll have a list of people that would be casual employees, and if someone actually expresses an opinion, what happens is they either go to the bottom of the phone call list or they drop off the bottom of the list and they're not rang. You can sit at home for weeks at a time, several weeks. You earn no income because you're not working. You don't get any base rate of pay. You're not paid any standby rate. You don't earn any income at all. So what ends up happening is people learn quite quickly, keep your mouth shut, don't put your hand up, don't say anything. Otherwise, you'll miss out on the work. And this is what's happening. The workplace is becoming more and more dangerous with less experienced people because no one wants to put the hand up and say anything. And that's the environment that's been created, especially here in Latrobe Valley from what I've seen. At the end of the day, it was their mine and it was their fire. So unless there was people in the work groups like myself and the guys that I worked with and all the guys from the CFA and the MFB, they would never have put that fire out.
Because it's a brown coal mine, you get the common combustibles of some sulphur dioxides, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and particulate matters. Particulate matter is just small grains of dust. Those dust particles can contain impurities such as metalloids and small gases trapped within them.
So PM stands for particulate matter, and the highly damaging particles tend to be very small. PM10s are large enough to be filtered by the lungs, whereas the PM2.5 and smaller particles are inhaled into the deepest part of the lung and then can actually be absorbed into the blood supply. And so conditions such as heart disease, stroke, acute asthma, through to effects on the growth of a fetus or the growth of lungs in children can be generated by these tiny chemically reactive particles. Partially combusted coal generates carbon monoxide. carbon monoxide binds to haemoglobin. One of the main functions of haemoglobin is to carry oxygen molecules. Carbon monoxide blocks that. People die if they're exposed to too much carbon monoxide. There is just an enormous amount of strong data now that exposure to air pollution is associated with a range of adverse health outcomes. And a good example is a recent study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. They were able to show that there was no safe level of exposure to PM2.5, and that as the PM2.5 level increased, mortality increased.
So it was very straightforward for me to do an analysis. I think it took me about 2 hours, and it showed there was a very high probability that deaths increased during that period of the fire. So the initial analysis I did estimated, I think it was around an 83% probability that there was an increase in deaths. But that initial data set was based on monthly data, which is quite crude really. And then during the inquiry, we got hold of daily data, which is what we normally use in this field. Every analysis I did was just as I expected. The association became stronger, and the probability that there was an increase of deaths in the mine fire now went up to 99%. My analysis estimated that there were around 11 deaths at the lower end, maybe up to about 24 deaths at the higher end, which is entirely in line with everything we knew beforehand, everything that had come from much larger studies. One of the key evidence I wanted to present down there was not actually from the fire, but was from some of the biggest organisations in the world, such as the World Health Organization, American Heart Association, and European Union, who have all concluded, based on the wealth of evidence, that there is a causal association between air pollution and death.
So there was a bit of information confusion going on in the Latrobe Valley, especially in the first couple of weeks. There was only one monitoring station set up initially at Traralgon, and that's not very adequate information for people that were in Morwell or other surrounding areas closer to the mine. As a result, there was about 2 weeks almost that the people of Morwell didn't have any information. They were getting up to almost levels of 40% increased mortality risk. And that was about 2 weeks after the actual initial fire started. So it was pretty bad.
Being in the valley during the fire was really confronting. I think a disproportionate number of my patients were coming in with respiratory complaints. I also noticed that there were a lot of patients who were both emotionally and physically devastated by what was happening. Some of the common things that people had were asthma or airways disease, so they'd come in with a cough, a lot of sputum production, feeling short of breath or like they were suffocating, not being able to walk as far as they used to. Some people had worsening in their heart symptoms, so things like angina from heart disease. And then in the weeks that followed, people were suffocating and they were stuck in hospital, stuck to the wall on oxygen.
So the levels of PM2.5 that were the peak levels that were found for a number of days at the time of the Morwell fire, were extreme. They were over 500 microgram per cubic metre, and those type of levels are much higher than are seen in the average Chinese city. The irony is that the particles that are most damaging we can't see, we can't smell, we don't even know it's happening.
For the first week we were down there providing emergency grants to people who'd been affected by the fire. I suppose I wasn't aware of what issues it was going to have on my health now. We were doing the grants out of a Greek Orthodox church in Morwell, and the open cut was at the back of where we were. So as we came in of the morning, you could see the helicopters coming across doing water bombing, and the steam and ash and stuff would be lifting up and going across their houses and coming back to where we were working. I developed the symptoms within about a month I was having trouble breathing, slight chest pains, stuff that I'd never had before. Went to hospital, they did a barrage of tests, but in the end they turned around and said that there's nothing wrong with the heart, so I went to a respiratory physician. It's still not good. I've still got issues with the voice. I went to see an ear, nose and throat specialist, put the camera down my throat, and he said you can see where there's been signs of smoke inhalation. And I guess for quality of life, there's things I used to love doing, whereas now I can't do any of that stuff. And it's been 3 years to try and to get some answers. I've only had 3 days down there on the front line, but I suppose for the people that were living there, experiencing this day in, day out, must have been sheer hell.
So literally all I was told was that my baby was anencephalic, which is the opposite to spina bifida. Instead of the hole at the bottom of the spine, it's at the top of the head. So when I was to look at him straight on, he was fully formed, absolutely beautiful. Like, I was 15 weeks, I didn't know I had a boy until that moment, and my heart was set on a boy. I was like, ah. And then to look at him bird's eye view, half of his brain was already disintegrated from the fluid in my uterus because his brain was just fully exposed. So going into the fire, I fell pregnant. I was literally sick the whole entire time. I went to an early ultrasound at 12 weeks, and the first thing he did after putting it onto my stomach was turn the volume right up, and then he was just like, we have a problem with this baby. I then had to have a preterm delivery at 15 weeks. Now, when they sent him off, I requested he was tested for the PM 2.5 toxins that were found in the fire, and they said that they were unavailable, that they couldn't do it, it was too late. I didn't have anything wrong with the chromosome or genetic testings, and I took my pregnancy vitamins as I was supposed to, day in, day out. Everything was perfect, like everything was done fine. We were trying, I was pregnant straight away. They couldn't tell me if it was because of the smoke, but there was no reason for me to lose my baby like I did. Absolutely no reason.
Well, after we'd finished on the fire, because I'd worked on the fire for nearly 12 weeks, and towards Christmas I came down with symptoms very similar to the flu, nearly exactly the same as the flu. But I couldn't get rid of it, I couldn't shake that condition at all. I'd end up seeing 4 GPs.
And we had to go to Sydney to my doctor, old family doctor.
Family doctor in Sydney. He said, you're in a really bad way. And I said, well, we know that, that's why I'm here. He said, you've got pulmonary fibrosis, and he says it's very severe. Most workplaces now, it's compulsory for people to present themselves for a pre-employment medical, which was what I had done. I presented as a 54-year-old male, non-smoker. So then when I'd done the lung function test, I was measured at just over 140%. So my lungs were 40% better than average. My lung capacity when I was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis was 40%. That's where it's at the moment. No, there's no chance for me to improve. At this point in time, I can't return to work. We've never had any contact from the mine owner operator, and there's no financial assistance from the company I worked for, which is really, really poor. And of course, the other frustrating thing is, if we had to wear masks and we were told to wear them, we would have worn them. They would have been provided and everyone would have worn masks. But in our work group, I never seen anyone wear masks at all, which was probably a mistake.
I think this community definitely understands its history. We know what happened during the privatisation and restructuring of our industry. We put up with all those promises that restructure would lead to regrowth and prosper. And I think when that fire occurred in the Latrobe Valley, I was amongst other people that said that fire should never have occurred. This is a mine that's situated right in the middle of the Latrobe Valley, and there's bush around that mine, and they are responsible to manage that coal they had sitting there. That corporation did not do that. They had the fuel. They are responsible for that, they and the regulators, because the regulators let them do that as well, and the regulators should never be let off the line. And unfortunately, what happens, I think, in these sort of circumstances, the regulators are bureaucrats working in Melbourne, some of them in Latrobe Valley, and some of them may look at this and they say it's a real problem. And I think they're effectively told to shut up because there's a really cosy relationship at that high bureaucratic level. And if they don't work.
This little valley has serviced the state for a long time at a great cost. They've been punished instead of thanked, and now they really need help. A victim will never speak out if it means upsetting their security or upsetting the person who looks after them. So in the same way, the people here won't speak out. If we don't accept the reality that it's ending, then there's no motivation to change. The fire actually only just took the lid off what was already there, but because of that, no one's able now to forget.
After months of speculation and increasing community tension, it's official. Hazelwood will shut down,
leaving more than 1,000 Latrobe Valley workers out of a job. It's a blow to a region already struggling with high unemployment.
And there are likely to be flow-on job losses in the wider community.
The final decision was taken 2 days ago with the last board at 9 p.m. It came down to financial viability, and it has been a very difficult decision to take.
Workers are devastated and say they're fearful for the future of their families.
The fellow who came down, he basically made a lovely speech and thanked everyone for their time and everything else, and we're going to be closing the doors on the 31st of March. So he was in, made his speech and gone by the time people had a chance to sort of take in what had happened, really. We expected eventually there would be a closure, and we thought it would be a phased shutdown. So, yeah, it was quite a shock to find that 5 months and you're gone. If you've been an operator in a power plant, you've got a multitude of skills, but they don't really transport to other industries very well. And that's the hard part, you know. We all want to do our bit to try and save the planet. We're definitely having an impact on what we're doing. You can see that everyone's going away from coal, and that's fine. But a lot of people don't realise the actual physics of how it all works. In the interim, you've got to have something to replace it. Otherwise, your frequency becomes too unstable. You know, you look at these countries overseas, they say they're 100% renewable. That's because they're connected to a grid with the rest of Europe, and that grid keeps them stable. You need to work on some other form of being able to store energy or create power, you know, better ways and better technologies so as people can offset some of the frequency disturbance. And they're the things that Australia should be looking at.
We're at a situation now where we're closing a power station down. Where are we going to get our power from in the future? How much is it going to cost? Everybody's got a stake in this, and everybody needs to play a decent role in making sure that we get reliable power provided to people at an economic rate that they can afford. And it seems to be with these sorts of renewable energy sources that are available, the more we use them, the cheaper they get, and the better they are for the community. And I think that's the way we need to be going.
I think taking control of your power is what's really driving this market.
You know, we talk about food, for example, you've got to think about where it comes from. And it's exactly the same with energy. And the beauty of renewables at the moment is that the cost of creating solar energy has fallen by 40% in the last 2 years. So we're in this wonderful position where, yes, it's great for the environment, but it's actually just cheaper than buying grid electricity. There's no downplaying the challenges that this area faces. I think all eyes are looking at the valley because all the roads electrically lead to the Latrobe Valley. Our infrastructure is just incredible, and it'd cost hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild that in another part of the state. But I think on top of that, we have such a skilled workforce here, thousands of people that understand the energy market. And the guys that we're picking up and reskilling into renewables, they already get 90% of what we do. I think at the moment it's this incredible opportunity, and we're going to change the entire energy grid. And now with storage, that's the missing link. You know, we're talking about something like the internet coming along or industrial revolution, where the tens and tens of billions of dollars that will be invested, that investment and those jobs can come into the Latrobe Valley.
I think working with some of the utility companies now, they've realised that the retailers which we buy our power from, they're all adopting renewables. They see the future. It's gone from being the retailer dictating what's going on to back to the customer now. So it's the tide's turned. So the mix of energy is going to be decentralised and centralised. It's going to be solar, wind is going to be the predominant two, and certainly backed up with the hydro. It's a simple, easy process to move forward with, and it can be done straight away. Now we've got the opportunity to set up these large factories, manufacture wind blades, manufacture poles, do everything here. We've got intelligent people with a lot of skills that you would see all around the world, and they're sitting in the valley.
So we've learnt lessons here and more. We know that the free market, left to its own devices, is not going to act in the interests of people or the planet. It's not going to give us the kind of worlds that we deserve or need. And the Valley is a really powerful testament to that. Earthworker is a community-owned cooperative made up of hundreds of members across the country who all have a stake in the co-op and all have a say in how the cooperative runs. When you have workers that own and run their own workplace, they're safer workplaces. You have people who are invested in what they're doing, and cooperatives have been shown to be a really resilient model, all over the world. So the aim of this factory is to manufacture really high quality solar hot water tanks. The advantages of this particular tank is that the polymer casing is a good thermal insulator. So it's a bit like the battery for your solar hot water system. The technology that we're making here, we hope to see used in households all around the country, with a particular focus initially in low-income households with their energy bills, whilst reducing carbon emissions and to support local livelihoods. There is a brighter future for this place. It's been a really unlikely but a strong alliance of people from across traditional divides believing in this vision of a just transition, but not just a just transition to a far more democratic and fair and sustainable future.
Over the last 3 years, I've had a look at a lot of different solutions, and I really believe that you can't alter this industry without altering both the economy and the community. At the moment, if the government does subsidies and those kind of things, which is the direction that they're working in, we're going to get a lot of very large, privately owned, probably foreign-owned investment in that, and we're in the same situation. We're in the same situation where the foreign company that owns it can just turn it off when it's not viable. We don't need that.
Well, I think we're getting back to the way we run our societies. I mean, we've got a bunch of parliamentarians that are all going to Canberra. They're all following the party line. If they don't, they get kicked out or they don't get pre-selected for the next seat. They're all primarily funded by big corporations. That's where the real money into Parliament goes to. And these parliamentarians, they might think they're doing the right thing, but essentially all they're doing is managing a market. They're not managing a community or a society. And they believe, mistakenly in my view, they believe that market and its trickle-down effect will somehow provide jobs and opportunities to the future communities. And what we really see happening is the trickle-down effect is being limited more and more. There's less and less flowing off the supposed big tables. And the sorts of damage these companies are doing to our environment and our future is breathtakingly bad for us. This is the only planet we've got. We're on this lifeboat, we're on it together. And instead of breaking the planks on it to keep the fire going in the middle so we can keep some people in great warmth and comfort while the boat's sinking, I don't think it's the way to go.
I think there's a major social justice issue here. The Valley has copped appalling health outcomes. And the terrible thing is that when you stack up the true cost of coal against the cost of renewables, for example, coal performs very badly. And I don't come at it from any particular political ideology. I simply look at it as a merits-based issue. The true cost of coal is phenomenal. And I think it exposes a very fundamental problem. But because of the distortions which are built into our economy and our political system, people are able to get away with the fiction that coal is a relatively cheap and benign source of energy, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth.
So we have a very carbon-intensive electricity system, and over 80% of our electricity is generated from fossil fuels. Interestingly, in Australia, the mining industry contributes less than 2% to overall employment. But it's actually, I guess, the combustion of coal that has the more widespread health impacts, and that really does concern us. A lot of people don't realise that air pollution contributes to over 3,000 deaths per year, which is actually double our national road toll. And if we take those considerations into account, coal and electricity produced from coal can actually be very expensive.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it makes much difference about whether it's brown coal or black coal. The issue is that represents the 200 years of economic development that we've had, which is all based on pulling out of the earth the fossilised remains of animals and plants from many hundreds of millions of years ago. There's no question that that fueled the great industrial revolution. It has made everything that we currently have by way of physical, technological existence. But it's been obvious for some time that there would be an end to that. The tragedy for us is that we know that we practically live, breathe, eat fossil fuels. And the result of that is going to be cataclysmic if we don't do something about it. So it's that they've just reached their end. It's that we have to hasten that end, or everything that we think we built with that is now threatened.
I grew up on land here. I can tell you that climate change is real. Why that is a difficult subject here is because people don't want to be to blame for it. Right? The same as the health in the valley has never been able to be addressed. Because your husband works at the power station, although your kids are sick. Right? You don't want to be blaming your husband that your kids are sick for his job. Right? People don't want to know that. People can't, within themselves, accept that. Right? And you can't really ask them to. So there's a culture of denial within the valley about climate change that must exist to be able to do the work.
People are connected to those mines and connected to those jobs, and the idea of transitioning from one form of power to another, there's lots of ideas that are going to come on board, but it is pointless coming to this community and saying, look, we want you to do this and you're going to do that. This community has been told what to do for so long that it doesn't listen. It's not interested. It immediately gets its back up, and so it should. We know that there are big picture problems, but what we need is we need the whole of Victoria. We need your support, we need your expertise, and we need you on the journey with us.
I think the way forward is to put two and two together, that coal is dying here. The industry is no longer viable, we've got to build a new one. What we know is electricity, let's have a go at that. Then we can tackle it in a new way. What we're finding is that the big corporations are starting to get in on it. That's no good. I think what we need is democratisation of the power industry. I think the people need to own it. And I think the future of the valley depends on how much we can provide a culture, a medium, a place that the people of the valley can do that they can have a bash. I believe that is the solution. I'm trying to promote hope here. I have to have a bit of it myself, even though there are days when I think I should just walk away. This is too hard. I think our sense of self-worth, our industry, has been broken. And the despair is you can taste it in the air in some places. But I don't think that that's the end. I think that's the motivator.
For me, it boils back down to throwing a switch and the light comes on, and every time you throw the switch, you try and stop and think, I am so rich, I am so unimaginably rich that I can turn a light on every time I walk into the house. And to me, that is our enormous wealth that so many people don't notice. They just throw a switch on and assume that the light is going to come on.